So it's great to have you all here, and I just want to welcome you all to the Thinking Centre here in Ireland on this lovely spring evening. And there will be an opportunity at the end if people want to ask any questions or make any comments. And if we're only a small number, instead of having to do it on the chat, which you can do if you want, you can maybe verbalize your question at the end as a sort of at that stage. So I'll start by saying that maybe just something quickly about the Thinking Centre. The Thinking Centre is primarily attempting always to avoid criticizing the situation that tends to occur in the minds of us humans. Because my experience is that all humans are very intelligent in certain areas, and then there can be other areas that something is not functioning properly. And people in different areas may function differently. And so what the Thinking Centre is interested in is not criticizing, because if we were interested in criticizing, we'd have to be criticizing ourselves. And I never like to criticize myself. So it's in order to try and get an understanding of what prevents us accessing this extraordinary intelligence that we essentially are and is always available to us. And in some way, then we can help one another to do that. And the subject of tonight's talk is the subject really of how racial prejudice exists in the world and what are the elements that tend to dissolve it. So in that regard, I'm delighted to invite Rosie Williams to be the presenter tonight. I have known Rosie for about 3 years, and a couple of months ago, Rosie informed me that she was going on a backpacking trip to Pakistan on her own. And I knew that Rosie had done backpacking trips to other parts of the world, and she has been very adventurous in her travels. But I was particularly interested that she was now going on her own, and she was now visiting Pakistan for the first time. So maybe, Rosie, then you might start by telling us a little bit about even how you felt about taking this big adventure on your own.
Yeah, so as Eddie said, I've been on and off traveling for the last probably now 6 or 7 years. And I've been a lot to Africa and Asia, South America, and a lot of the time mostly alone. So I've been traveling alone and I'm used to that. But I had never been to that part of the world, nor necessarily to such a Muslim country. And I knew that I wanted to experience it for myself because I've read a lot about the news, and specifically Pakistan is in the news a lot, but not necessarily in a good sense. I would say that a lot of it only really comes off in quite a negative way. And I'm one of those people that I'd like to see things with my own eyes and to understand it and also learn more about the different cultures. So I was like, okay, Pakistan sounds like a good option, not only for a challenge as myself, but also to try and see if what I read in the news and in the media, if that's what it's like out there. I wouldn't have done it if it was my first ever solo trip, because I think that would have been a bit too much. I think because I've traveled before, then there's things that you pick up, you know, and you get much more used to traveling. So I said I was going to Pakistan, and obviously there was a lot of people that supported the decision, and they thought it was great. There was also a lot of people that were scared, that would ask me the question, why Pakistan? Why would you want to go there, especially as a solo female traveler? You're gonna have a lot of problems. You know, it's not safe for a woman to travel there, especially a Western woman. And I did a lot of research, obviously, because I'm not just going to throw myself into a dangerous country. I did a lot of research, I read a lot about it, and I came to the conclusion that more and more people are trying to explore that area, and that it seemed that I could definitely give it a go. So, yeah.
And Rosie, yeah, I wanted you to sort of say some things before I introduce you more about a bit more about your background, because it would be nice for people who watch this afterwards on YouTube to know a little bit about you. So thanks for that introduction you've just given, which is a very good foundation, I think, to what's going to follow. But in any case, Rosie Williams is a passionate visual storyteller, documentary filmmaker, and photojournalist, using her camera as a tool to share, connect, and create impact. She is particularly interested in people and communities who have few opportunities to be seen or heard. Originally from the UK, but with a Spanish soul after growing up in the south of Spain, she is now currently based in Squamish on the west coast of Canada. And that's, I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, so here right now it's 11 a.m. On the west coast of Canada, so it's our morning. And as Eddie said, so I've been doing documentaries for the last maybe 3.5 years, and also focusing a lot on photography and photojournalism. And that was one of the other reasons that I wanted to go to Pakistan, because I knew that there were a lot of people and communities that potentially were misunderstood in the media. And I wanted to see if maybe I could help out with some projects over there for some different NGOs that I'd met, to try and show the different side of Pakistan, the welcoming, the warm, the colorful side of Pakistan that isn't spoken about so much in the media.
Great. And maybe then, Rosie, you might like to tell us then about what actually happened when you went.
Yeah, so as soon as I arrived on my flight over, I was the only person I was the only white Western traveler on this massive airplane of maybe, I don't know, 400 or 500 people. And I was already getting a lot of looks, you know, in the airport. Why is this person going to Pakistan? And one of the cabin crew members on board, called Zia, came up to me, and he just sat next to me, and he was like, hello, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to travel to Pakistan. And he was like, why? Why are you going? And I'm like, well, I'm coming as a tourist. I want to learn about your culture and meet the people. And he was like, right, give me 20 minutes. I'm going to finish what I'm doing. I'm going to come and sit down with you, and I'm going to tell you everywhere you have to go, all the people you have to meet. And that for me was the first moment. And after that, everyone I met was very similar in terms of the most welcoming, hospitable people I've ever met. So he came, sat down, he made me a huge list of everywhere I had to visit, all of the necessary phone numbers in case anything happened, his number, his mum's number, if I needed to call anyone in any city. And surely enough, later on, a couple of weeks later, he invited me to his friend's wedding. So he picked me up a couple of weeks later, and we went to his friend's wedding. and which was also a beautiful cultural event full of color, people dancing. In that event, it's true that the women and the men were still separate. A Pakistan wedding normally is about 3 days long, sometimes more, sometimes less. But maybe we'll get on to more about the how women are treated in the country. But that was the first welcoming moment. And ever since then, wherever I went in the country, and I moved around quite a lot, going to different, east, west, north, and south, the people were just so welcoming. I think that was something that struck me the most. I would be walking down the street and they were just so happy that there was a traveler, a tourist, a photographer in their land, that they would just come up to me and say, oh, please come to my home for tea. We want to meet you. We want to speak to you, please. And it would be so hard to leave, because then they were like, oh, you have to spend the night. We have a wedding happening tomorrow. There was always a wedding happening. And they would just offer me accommodation, food. And I know I'm a backpacker, so I'm very used to sleeping in probably in more budget places. And Pakistan, sadly, it's not very well equipped for tourism, because they've lacked it so much over the last years. So there's not as many hostels or hotels. So I probably spent about 80% of my time staying with families, families that I met through different people, or just that heard that I was in a village, and they were just, well, you have to come and stay with us. And it's something that from where I come from the UK or Spain, I definitely felt that we can learn so much from that culture, and the generosity, the givingness that they have, the welcoming sense for everyone wherever you go. It was truly a beautiful sense of the country. And everyone would always ask me, what do you think of Pakistan? Please tell us what you think. Tell your friends to come, tell your families to come. They're so eager for tourists to come and see that their country isn't what is said on the news. Having said this, like there were different, as a woman, I definitely had to be careful in different situations. No one told me that I had to cover my head or body, but I did do it out of respect, just because you're surrounded, I'm going into their land, into their culture, into their religion. So out of respect, I covered myself, also my head most of the time. But it also depends on the region. So Pakistan is so big, it's very hard to put it into one box, if that makes sense. It's effectively the size of UK and France put together. So there are definitely, depending on the region where you go, some culture is much more strict than other places. So I would have to be a bit careful in more places than others. But people were welcoming all over. And I think that was the biggest thing that I took back from Pakistan.
Yeah, that statistic you just mentioned about it's as big as the UK and France put together. I hadn't realized that it's such an enormous country.
Yeah, and so I would normally get the bus everywhere. And obviously, so in Pakistan, they have 74 languages. So it was very hard for me to communicate. Urdu is a spoken language out there, but a lot of people, if they didn't go to school, they might not necessarily speak Urdu. They would tend to speak the language from their region, such as Wakhi or Punjabi. But English, a lot of people did speak English. And I don't like this word, but this is how they would describe themselves. They would say that the educated people spoke English, meaning that those that tend to went to school and university. which were normally the people with money. So one thing to say about Pakistan is that there's a very large divide between rich and poor. And that's why, sadly, there's a lot of corruption within the government and within the country itself. So for the first 2 weeks, the people that I tend to have conversations with were the people that spoke English. But it was also the people that had more power and that were also a lot richer. So they would give me a certain look at the country. But I was very interested in the communities that didn't necessarily have a good level of English. And for example, like you say, it's such a big country. And one of the things, I would always get the bus everywhere. And even though the bus drivers didn't speak English, whenever I got on board of the bus, they would always bring me forward to the front row, right behind the driver, so that they could keep an eye on me, just make sure that I'm safe, you know. And then they didn't speak a word of English, but I remember he kept on saying, are you hungry? And we would ever stop, when we would stop for food, he would always buy me a meal, and then he would give it to me behind the bus driver's seat so that I was always catered for. And it took me a little while to get used to moving around, because of, like, in their religion and in their culture more so. When you get off at different restaurants, a lot of the time the women and the men are in separate parts. And the first time I got off late of the bus, and I just went and sat down and had a cup of tea in the male section, and everybody was looking at me, and I was like, why is everybody looking at me? I'm just having a cup of tea. And then later, the woman that was sat next to me, she was like, I'll show you where the women tend to go. And that was fine. And I mean, since I'm speaking about it, I would say that, and again, it really depends on what region of the country you are, because it's so large. I can't say, well, in Pakistan, it's more specifically on the region, and also on the different type of religion. But in the west, so nearer Peshawar, which is near the Afghanistan border, there I would say they're much more conservative than maybe the rest of Pakistan. Also because of their history, Pakistan has suffered a lot since the Afghanistan war, not only because there was a lot of refugees that came over, but for different reasons. It means that their security level in Pakistan had to rise, so the military became a very important part of Pakistan to try and keep the Afghanistan Taliban out and try and keep the war from their land. And you notice this the more you are to the border, also for different reasons, such as in Afghanistan, there's a lot of drug production. And one of the biggest drug factories had to be moved over to Pakistan. So suddenly a lot of things that hadn't happened before the war were now occurring in their country. And that's what people believe is when tourism started to stop. So a lot of people feel that because of the war, it really affected their country. And when I was closer to the border, that was when I think it's much more conservative there, and I, as a woman, was more careful. And trying to combine it a little bit with the thinking center and how you say conversation is so important. There, when people would ask me, what do you think of our country? I would always say, and it's true, I love it. I love the culture, the people. But specifically in the West, some of the women, in my opinion, aren't treated with respect. And as a woman myself, a very young woman, seeing that and thinking, well, it could easily just be me, you know. I'm looking at a 25-year-old girl who has never been to or dropped out of school very young, has maybe 3 or 4 kids, and we went to a baby shower party, which happens 7 days after a baby is born. And normally people love photos. They always ask me for photos, you know, can you take a picture with us, a selfie? And I said they were doing henna and mendi on my hands. And I said, oh, let's take a photo together to capture this moment. And it was very clear that they weren't allowed to take a photo because their husbands had told them that they're not allowed to be photographed. So when I would speak to the husbands, and after being a month or 6 weeks in the country, I felt confident enough that I could form a conversation with more depth, then I would say, I love your country, but I don't understand why I'm allowed to take your photo, but not the photo of your wife when she wants to take a picture with me. And it was really interesting because a lot of the time they would say, no, you're right, and we need to change, obviously. And I would say to them, I don't want to change your culture. Like that's so far from what I'm trying to say, because if anything, we from my country, the UK or Spain, we could learn so much from your culture, because you have so much beautiful elements to give and to share. But I think some way of how women are treated is not necessarily humane. And they would agree, and they would say we are trying to change. Other times they would kind of fight it, and they would give me reasons as to why that happens. But I think this was one of the most important things, is that when I was there, I got the confidence to have conversations that could debate and create discussion about certain elements of how women are treated in the country.
And Rosie, did what were you feeling? Was it an environment then when you were approaching the conversations in that manner? Did you still feel safe, or was the environment still safe?
Yes, 100%. Honest, 100%. I always felt safe. I mean, I would say I wouldn't necessarily just ask anybody. So I would ask someone that I had been speaking to for some time, and that I knew that I could get into this topic. So I was very careful as to who I spoke to about this specific topic. But I always felt safe. I mean, it's a little bit annoying in the sense that as a Westerner, so as traveling from the West, you are seen as a king or a queen there, you know, because they have so few tourists. They see you as you effectively could be a celebrity there, you know. You are taken to all of the places. You know, if I wanted to, I could meet the president. It's that level of power just because of where we come from. And there's very little you can do wrong because you are a Western traveler there, which is good because it means that you can get yourself into situations and into rooms and with people that otherwise would be very hard. So you have a very high level of understanding of how the country works, and you can ask these type of questions to men in power. But also it's hard because you see people there, you know, much more talented than I am, and yet they're not necessarily allowed anywhere near where I can go.
And Rosie, what did you meet other Westerners who were traveling, and what was their impressions?
There was, I mean, I do think that Pakistan, and a lot of what I'm saying, I think can be put onto every country, or not every country, but a lot of countries out there, is that we hear things and we read things, and then we create our own opinion on the country, and a lot of the time that opinion is not right. And I think a lot of travelers that I met there, they had exactly the same experience as I did. I probably met, so I was there for just over 2 months, and I probably met maybe 6 or 7 travelers, which is not a lot compared to other neighboring countries such as India. But the people that I met there, everybody would say the same. They wouldn't want to leave Pakistan. I met one traveler who left for 6 months and she came back because she loved it so much, because the people were just so welcoming. And a lot of people cycle there. And then there are a lot of people going onwards to Afghanistan, which again is one of those countries that you wouldn't dare think of traveling to, especially as a solo female. But I met quite a few females, travelers that were going on to Afghanistan, or that had just arrived from Afghanistan across the border. And as every traveler would say, it's not so, for example, during the election period in Pakistan, maybe I would say, okay, maybe it's not the perfect time to go, because there's probably going to be a bit more trouble around the streets and everything. So you just have to inform yourself before you go to any country in the world, really. But everybody was incredibly safe, very little trouble. And if there was trouble, it's not more than what you might get in Barcelona, for example. So in Barcelona, it's very known for its crime, like just stealing mobile phones and things. And I don't think that nobody would ever steal from you in Pakistan, because that's very against their religion. But one thing that did happen, so if a man saw me walking through the street, then maybe he would approach me, because for them it's not normal that women from their country walk alone. So potentially he would think that maybe she is available to marry. And I'm not married, but I did have a wedding ring with me, just because I felt it was more easy just to kind of say, no, I'm sorry, I'm married. And they would completely respect that. Oh, lovely. And they would want to talk about your wedding, but I would just do that to protect myself. But if a man would come up to me and maybe be a little bit too much in my space, a lot of the time it was because of lack of education. A lot of people in Pakistan drop out of school, aren't allowed to go to school, or don't have the money to go to school,
Is
means...
is that with regard to people not being allowed to go to school, is that mostly females, or is it both females and males?
It's mostly females. However, a lot of men might not go to school because they might have to work elsewhere. So it might be that they have to work in the countryside, or that maybe the village hasn't got a school, so they've got to travel too far, it's becoming less of a problem, because there are charities there that are working for early childhood development. But it does also occur with men, or if so, they might do their first few years, but then they definitely wouldn't go to university, because of it, unless they had money, which is, again, Pakistan sadly is a lot about money. So if a lot of the time they would see a Western female woman, and the only reference they would have is porn or TikTok. So a lot of times they would come up and they would kind of like, they wouldn't understand why I'm alone, first of all. And if they did get a little bit too close when I spoke about it with other local Pakistanis, a lot of the time they would say is that they just don't understand. They've never been taught that a woman can walk alone.
Right. Yeah.
And it does come down to education. So there's a fine lines to go, but.
And Rosie, just a different question. What's the scenery like?
Good question. Honestly, I wish I could be there right now. So I think a lot of people don't know this about Pakistan, but the north of Pakistan, which goes all the way up to the border of China, is It's got one of the highest mountains in the world, which is K2, which goes up to 8,600 meters. And it's just full of the most amazing hiking in the world. And there are so little people exploring. So the whole north of Pakistan, it's 5 different mountain ranges. One of them is the Himalayas, which is the most known one, but there is also a Karakoram range, which is where the K2 mountain is. And it's just full of hikes and so little people. So I did a lot of hiking up there, and also the mentality up there is so free. I hitchhiked a lot up there. A lot of the businesses up there and hotels are led by women. It's a very different culture. It's almost like you're transported to a different country, and it's beautiful. It's just there's snow leopard, ibex. The people love to dance, both women and men. There's festivals. So in the north of Pakistan, it's very easy to travel. It's almost like, I guess you could describe it as maybe going to the mountains in Nepal, but much cheaper and with less people. And if anything, more welcoming, because they want tourists, you know, they want people to come and hike their mountains to see what beauty they can offer. So that's the north. The cities are very similar to Indian cities, in the sense that there's very busy, lots of hustle and bustle, a lot of tuk-tuks and taxis, people walking, bicycles, colour, markets. There's a lot of Lahore, which is one of the most known cities, has beautiful architecture and mosques. And it has a market. There's a market in the center of the town, which is, it has a market for everything. So there's a market for buttons, and you go to the market for buttons, and it's about 15 shops just selling all buttons. And then, of course, the food is very known all over Pakistan, for spicy, for beautiful curry, fantastic local meat. And then the west and the north, there's another mountain range. And there's also a lot of deserts as you start to go south, where you start to go into the warmer area. There's very large deserts. There is one part of the country which is called Balochistan, which is foreigners aren't allowed to go there. And that is because it's on the border with Afghanistan, and there are some active terrorist groups there. But it's so far away from where I was. And the government do this to protect foreigners. If you don't go in there, you won't have any trouble at all. And you can also check the government UK website to see travel advice. So you go through the deserts, and further down, then there's the Karachi, which used to be the capital of Pakistan, and it's a huge, and that's where you see a lot of architecture from the British colony. Beautiful old buildings that they have now used them as museums or different art centers. And it's a big port for fishing. It's very populated. That's the only thing. So the cities are populated, and they're quite polluted. They're trying to work with pollution. It's a big problem at the moment because of the amount of cars that do move around.
And Rosie, did you get any sense of how they feel about, say, for example, Islamic State? Was there any sense of that? You know, why I ask that question is because Western media, and when we haven't had the opportunity to experience directly what you have, there's this tendency to think, well, Islamic State and Pakistan, there's a sort of a fusion between them. But I'm wondering.
I would say no. It just wasn't around at all. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that you say that the media shows them as a fusion, but it's just, you just don't come across it at all. It doesn't come up in conversation. When I have had conversations about it with people, they just say, they would say to me, look around, uh where do you see that? Having said this, um there are tribal areas again on the border of Afghanistan where it is more active. And when I was there, one of the general ministers of the government passed away, and there was going to be a very big funeral. And someone I was staying with, he's part of a tribe, and he had to go and check that there weren't going to be any suicide bombers in that funeral, because it was about 20,000 people were going to this funeral. It was a very big military event, and he had to be there for security reasons. And he would carry guns, and he had a lot of training. And I asked him, like, how do you, what's your vision on like having all of these guns and having to do this? And he would kind of say, because of the history they've had, they feel that they have to be prepared for anything, and that all he's doing is protecting the people of Pakistan from different terrorist groups. Yeah.
So yeah, and in that same arena, did you get any sense of how they feel about the West, and more particularly, are there particular countries in the West that they think less favorably about than other countries in the West?
Yeah, I mean, there's still that thing in Pakistan that everybody wants to leave. Not everybody, but a big portion of them, because they would say that I guess it happens a lot with refugees and a lot with migration, is that what they see of the Western world is these countries that economically are doing very well, and that they all want to travel there, that they're going to get a job. So a lot of people do see the West, and especially America, as a dream destination, and they want to get there because they want a better life for them and their family. It's all about family and giving a better life to your kids, your wife, your parents. I would say that when I was there, so obviously the war had started in Palestine, between Palestine and Israel. So they really, and in that moment, they weren't keen on America. And maybe not so much either on the UK, because they were also backing at that. Well, I think when I was there, there was more talks about which countries was supporting Palestine. So they were quite open about that, and I did go to some protests for Palestine, because Pakistan is, or the people of Pakistan are very with Palestine, and they see them as their brothers. And people would stop me in the street and they would say, please tell the rest of the world or your countries that we stand with Palestine. So I think when I was there, because of the war, then it had generated a bit of a different liking to countries. But if aside from that, they would welcome anybody. They would always say to me, oh, I met a traveler from Italy, we love the Italians.
And of
But
course,
because of, yeah.
And of course, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't realized that the situation in Israel had started while you were still there. And of course, since you've left, they must be, absolutely shocked at the Western world and the way it's responded to what's happened with regard to the Palestinians. It must
I
be
think so. I
terrible.
think they see them as brothers and sisters. And it's a very strong bond. Due to culture and religion, I think. So I think especially maybe more so with America, but then at the same time, they would want to go to America because they want a better future.
Yes, yes.
And not everybody obviously wants to leave, because a lot of people love their homeland and they want to stay. But when you hear of someone doing very well in Italy, their cousin doing very well in Italy, then they want to leave. They want that better life. However, as a lot of people explained to me there, I mean, there was this one village I went to, which I think easily half of the population had left. But a lot of it was lies. It would be this young boy, I think he was 21, living in Italy. We spoke on video call, and he would say to me, I tell my family I'm doing great here because I don't want them to worry about me, but actually it's a lot harder than what we had heard to try and create a home in this case Europe. But apart from America, which I think maybe not everybody, and also because of the history with Afghanistan and everything, but apart from that, then they love people from the West. I mean there's always a thing that when you travel that they might think that you come with money, obviously, because you can travel, and because of what they see. They watch a lot of movies, TikTok, and now social media. And a lot of obviously we know that a lot of people on social media, it is lies, but they don't necessarily know that because they've never actually lived in a country or been able to travel. So a lot of the times their knowledge comes from what they see on the internet.
Yeah, and as you were describing how friendly they are, and that in that part of the world, you know, what comes to mind is Francis of Assisi, where he said that when you're the host, you have to treat everybody who comes into your space as the host really well. So they seem to be practicing what Francis of Assisi was actually saying. It's a sort of a form of Christianity in the true sense, because I've heard also, even in Afghanistan, the same thing, that people are incredibly welcoming of the visitor. One final question, Rosie, you mentioned there that you met some people who had been to Afghanistan and then come back, and because our image, or the image in the West of Afghanistan now, especially since the Americans left and the Taliban took over, is this really probably rigid imagery that anybody that would even cross the border into there would want to be crazy. So what I'd be interested to hear is the people that you might have met who came back from Afghanistan, their experience of Afghanistan.
Yeah, and obviously I can only say what they told me. And well, just to say on the friendliness and the hospitality, so it is in their religion and in their culture, you're supposed to treat the host for 3 days. So the idea is that the host stays with you for 3 days and you treat them as a queen or a king. You give them gifts, you cook for them every day, and it's considered that on the 4th day they're your family. So if you stay longer than 3 days, they become your family, and then they're just part of it all. So then they just help cook and everything, because after the 3 days of hosting, then they're your family. And it's something, but for me, I think the way that they give everything, the less people have, the more they give. It's so true there. And I think that for me, it's definitely something that I've brought back from their culture, that I'm trying to be a much more giving person in where I can be. And I know obviously here things are much more expensive, but I think that was something that I think we could learn from a lot from their culture. And with Afghanistan, so I think it's very different obviously from Pakistan, and I think you have to be a lot more careful. You have to do your research, and I would say that I wouldn't go to Afghanistan without knowing someone there. I think contacts are very useful wherever you go. It's always good to know that you can always have someone that you can call. It's very different from a lot what I heard. They had no problems at all. If you stay on the path you're supposed to. But what I mean is, so there are some locations that you're not supposed to go in Afghanistan that are much more controlled by the Taliban. And obviously, if you do go down there, and whilst you have been told not to, then you might encounter some problems. If you stay, and if you dress appropriately, and if you stay on effectively where the tourists are allowed to go, then you should not encounter any problems. But as I say, it's very hard for me to say, because I probably met maybe 2 or 3 people that had gone. Some people did have problems. This one man that I met, but it was because he had left himself inside a room with a woman alone, and that's just not allowed in Afghanistan. So yes, I would say Afghanistan is absolutely fine to travel. You just have to be a lot more cautious, and you just have to do a lot more research before going. Pakistan, on the other side, is obviously still good to do your research, but it's much more free. You're much more free to go when you want, where you want, alone, together, around. You could hold, like, if I had gone with my partner, I could hold his hand, no problem. And especially when you go to the shopping mall, I mean, people do, like, there were couples there kissing, holding hands right in front of me, walking around, very young people. You know, in the cities, people wear jeans, they wear short tops, they wear, like, some people wear heels when they go out and about. Everybody drinks whiskey. I
Really?
got a bottle, yeah, I got a bottle of whiskey from the policeman. There's a whiskey distillery in the north of Islamabad. There's some really nice breweries, some really nice beer. Beer that has been, like, going from 1962, I think. And there's these shops that you can go and buy these beer. And obviously there's Christians there. And if you're a Christian, and you have a card that allows you to buy alcohol, but it's a very known thing that everybody drinks, even though it is haram. Haram means that it's almost like a sin against the religion. But I would say that there's different levels of sins, and some people do different harams depending on how important it is for their part of the religion.
So at least it's an enjoyable sin.
Yes, but yeah, exactly.
Oh, I mean, it's fascinating. I find what I've learned from you even tonight. As I'm just watching the time, and are you going to show some photographs, or do you
I
want?
do. I have a few photos, which I hope that's okay. I'll just show you. It's more just, and the photos I've chosen, it's more just about vibrancy, color, and maybe some art and culture, because they're also very known for their art and music. I helped out with a documentary about a very famous classical singer when I was there, and it's just beautiful. And a lot of the music sadly hasn't reached us yet, but it's full of such potential and beauty. But anyway, so I'll just show you some. Let me do this. So I'll be very quick, because I don't want to take up any more of your time. So one thing is that all of the trucks in Pakistan are painted. So this is a truck yard, and they paint these beautiful trucks. And it's for anything from motorbikes to bikes to garbage, rubbish collection trucks, and it's all painted. And it comes from, I think it's a Sufi tradition where they decorate shrines, and it's believed that they will protect them on the road. So, for example, this truck driver wanted to have a painting of his son on the back of the truck to protect him on the road. But it's absolutely beautiful. You see them driving around everywhere. And then this is another man which is sewing these things onto the inside of the cars and the trucks to make the inside more colorful. And as you can see here, so like the front of it, it will have these metal wooden doors on. And everything does have a meaning. I think that's the beauty of it, that a lot of elements there have meanings on the colors and as to what to paint. But the trucks are very beautiful and colorful. This is a headmistress at a local school. So when I was there, I did some work in some of the schools, and it was always nice to meet women that are working there and have worked themselves up. So she's the principal of this school. And they're so here, so they would always invite me everywhere for tea and for cakes. This is in another school. This is another school. And then cricket. I mean, I don't think I've ever watched so much cricket in my life. I'm not sure I ever will again. It's just everywhere you go, anywhere, there will be people playing cricket. This is on the side of a riverbank in the mountains, and they were doing a cricket tournament. And they spend hours watching the cricket. This was 2 boys playing cricket on the side of the shops. So I mean it when I say it's wherever they get the space, they will play cricket, and they know everything about cricket. This is some architecture. So this is the Badshai Mosque in Lahore, which is just beautiful, beautiful ceilings, wall, and they're very happy for you to go in and walk around. And they will also teach you about their history, because they want you to, the biggest thing they want you to do is share it with people. And that was why I was excited about this school, because I think it's important to share. This is the ceiling, and as you can see, it's just so much detail and color. This is very interesting. So this is the Kalash culture, a Kalash tribe, which is a tribe in the north of Pakistan. There's different beliefs as to where they come from, if it's descendants of Alexander the Great or if it's Afghanistan tribe. But they have these beautiful blue eyes, and they have no religion, so they're not Muslim. They grow their own wine. So their wine is famous. It's called the Kalash wine, and they have festivals, and they have so many different unique parts of their culture. And there's about 3 valleys in the mountains left with this community. This is one of the houses of the Kalash tribes in the mountains, and it's surrounded by vineyards. This is one of the schools up in the Kalash, and because it's cold, they obviously have fires in there. This was one of the elderly ladies, and I stayed with the teacher in their house. They invite you in to stay. And then, as I was saying before, the north of Pakistan is just full of these beautiful mountains and rivers, and wonderful people. She was the neighbor of where I was staying, and she always wanted pictures whenever she saw me out and about walking around. I was there in the autumn, which is very famous because of the poplar trees, and they all turn yellow, and they have a lot of glaciers, and there's a lot of guides. This is a local family. So this is Saida's family, which I was staying with for 2 weeks, and it was her birthday. So they'd all come together in a very traditional Pakistan living room, where everybody sits on the floor around the heating stoves to make sure that they're warm. And we were celebrating Saida's mum's birthday. This is so in Pakistan, there's a very large transgender community, which dates back centuries. And this is a transgender dance, traditional dance, which comes from the south of Pakistan near Karachi. And puppetry is very famous, and they go around and they try and teach kids different political things, I guess, through puppets, and to understand how to treat people and love and kindness through puppetry. And a lot of music, just beautiful music everywhere you go, and singing and festivals. Here, so this is a little bit more about the art side. So here he's making a chair stand, and it's beautiful bark color that he melts to create it, and it's all done by hand, and they all gather afterwards for lunch. So it's also very much a community arts. This is some of traditional Kabbali music, The man on the left has a family that sings in the local shrines, and we were just walking past here, and he saw us and he said, "Oh, you want to hear some music? Please come. I want to show you my music." And we were sat in the back of the house, and him and his son were playing some beautiful music, and he is also the carpenter, so he makes these instruments, the wooden instruments. They do have a name, which I have sadly forgotten, but I've got it written down somewhere if you'd like to know. Sorry, these are quite small, these pictures, because I think but this was a local organization that invited me over, and obviously it's all men. So in these situations, the women aren't allowed to sit, but me being a foreigner, I was allowed to sit. And in these situations, I would question why the women are allowed to come in. And it was very interesting to talk to these different people. This is a wedding. So all of the weddings are very full of color, as I was saying, and beautiful dresses. This is henna that they have that they will later put on the hands. This is one of the family I was staying with, and we were cooking outside. And this was another family that I was walking past, and they wanted to meet me and invite me in for a lunch. This was a Palestine protest. I think I put this photo here just to kind of to show that even the kids are going out on the protests, to show that the kids are being taught by their families that all of the children in Palestine are their brothers and sisters, so that they should also go onto the streets and show their solidarity for Palestine. This is the desert. So as I'm sure you know, in 2022, there were some devastating floods that affected Pakistan. It affected over 33 million people. And this is one of the houses. And even though with very little, they insisted on making me lunch, and they were making me rotis on the fire. And I end this with the final picture, which is not necessarily the most positive picture, but it is what I'm currently working on. And so, as I was saying, they were affected by these devastating floods in 2022. And I visited the flood affected areas, and there are still so many people without clean water and food. And it's been almost forgotten, I guess, by the world that Pakistan's government is doing very little to help these people and these communities. So I'm currently trying to work with a charity that's on the ground there to provide clean water, medical care, and access for different communities in the land that were affected by the floods. And this is one of these families. So if you want to know more information about that, then please do email me as to what's going on in that situation. But I also wanted to speak about it because it is a large part of the population that are still very much, I've never seen poverty like it. So yes, I thought it was important also to bring it up.
Rosie, how big would the population be there that are affected by that you're referring to?
So when I was there, we spent, I'll just stop sharing this. When I was there, I spent 2 days driving around the affected communities, and we probably went to maybe 16 villages in total. And I mean, when I say village, it's probably a community of maybe 20 people. So I easily met, about 300 people, but we didn't go anywhere deep into the area. We were probably about an hour drive from the town. So definitely in the thousands, if not more.
Right.
But yeah, it was just the most accessible area from where I was staying.
Great. So seeing the photographs was a further strengthening of your wonderful story and presentation. And maybe just before we come to an end, if anybody would like to ask a question or say anything just in the last few minutes that we have. Do I see somebody? No. And if not, that's...
Oh, wait.
I'm trying to find... right. I don't see... Oh, wait, no, Eddie Fleur is putting his hand up. Hi, Eddie.
Rosie, that was absolutely delightful to listen to you. No, I really mean it. I was expecting... I hope I'm okay on this. I realise this is going on YouTube, but I did rather expect the kind of, dare I say this, the white middle-class lady who goes, or man who goes out there and has a rather patronising story. What I actually found was a great deal of really genuine emotion and power that was coming from you. It was lovely to hear. I have so many things I'd like to ask. Really involved with something that you did talk about, but I don't think there's time. But it would be questions about something you were talking of with regards to culture and what we could learn. And you, okay, yes, I understand you spoke of the women, and I understand everything to do with that, but I do sometimes wonder whether we in the West, you know, let's be honest, it's only been really in the last 50 or 60 years, after a long time, that we're getting some sense of equality. And even there, daily, I see the West isn't really doing that well. And I just wondered, and it's too big a subject to ask, it's just what you come away with, because here we are in the West once again, as we've done in Africa, as we've done everywhere we've gone, imposing our latest, and this is not against women, but trying to enforce our culture instead of, as you say, stepping back and saying, do you know what, we've got things to learn here as well. And this is not an anti, I'm trying to talk about the cultures here and how they clashed. And I just think, I don't know, that's something I would love to hear more about.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, Eddie, I'd be so happy to speak to you about it in more detail when we have more time, of course. I guess just to answer you briefly, I think, and putting the women's subject aside, I do think that obviously, like you say, we are still, I mean, we are working towards equality every single day in the West, and getting there on some aspects, but on others we're still very much behind. I think comparing it to women there, for them it would be seen as full freedom, because it's so different level. And what I do think is that with the culture thing, so for me, I feel like we've got so little culture in the West compared to Pakistan. And I think that's when I spoke to them there, I would always say, I don't want to try and change any, like, your culture or anything. If anything, I want to learn from it. Because one of the things that I took away from Pakistan was, so they're very, everything is quite slow paced, in the sense that if you're late, don't worry. Or if you have to delay something because you want to spend an extra 10 minutes sat down speaking to this person, that's okay. I think they give a lot of time to people. It's not all about money, and it's not all about this quick pace. We must get everything done. We have this career we have to focus on, or we're always running around. And I think one thing that Pakistan really taught me was to stop, to kind of pause, take a minute to appreciate what we have, where you are, who's around you. And that if I spend 2 hours speaking to this woman and having tea, that could be one of the most important things I do that day. And that it's not all about rushing and time. And sometimes, you know, we don't even give 5 minutes to call a friend or something, because we're like, oh no, we're too busy, we don't even have the time to do that. And I would meet people there that they would 100% make sure that every day they go and visit a neighbor, or that on Fridays, for example, it's one village I did, on Fridays every family would take it in turns to cook for all of the neighbors. And it's just it's something that I think, and obviously I'm young, so I don't know if it was like this 60 or 70 years ago, and maybe it was more so, and maybe it is still in some rural parts. I come from a very rural part of Spain, and there were still some elements that I could see similar in some ways, because it's still like in my village in Spain, we stay out until 2 a.m. with the granny sat on a doorstep, you know. There's still that, but it's dying out. And I think that that's one thing I could learn from Pakistan, is not only to really engage with people around you, to speak more to people, but also the slow pace, and not to rush. That life is okay if it's a little bit more like it can be simple, and you can just stop and appreciate people around you a bit more. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I learned, which was really good for me, because I just quit my job after 3.5 years of working. I mean, like 12-hour shifts every day, running around, and all my life just kind of went around work, you know. And I think Pakistan taught me that, like, on Fridays, for them, it's very important that Friday is a holy day, that they go and pray for most of the day. And that obviously it's not even a question. No, you go and pray, and you have that time. And if something happens to your family, no, you go and have that time with your family. So I think their priorities is still very different than maybe what we have grown to in the West, I guess.
Yeah, that's lovely. It's, as you say, it is the idea between the equality between both genders. It is only, we do that through education, very slowly, but try not to do what we've done in the past, which is throw the baby out with the bathwater. No, it's absolutely delightful. Honestly, I'm so pleased. I listened to this. I wish there had been more of us, really, because you deserved it.
Oh,
honestly, I am so. It's very illuminating, incredible. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Even the alcohol thing.
Oh yeah, honestly, some really good whiskey. I even bought some back for my dad.
I don't drink, by the way.
But I would say the equality thing. I mean, that obviously I want to paint a fantastic picture of Pakistan, because I want more people to travel there. I want people to know the country. At the same time, like, I don't agree with how the women are treated there, and I obviously want to also get that across. But and it is but as you say, I do think that education is so key. I think education and conversation is so key in them change, or not even changing, but just slowly accepting more. And they are, and like they would argue. So someone said to me, honestly, Rosie, he said, Rosie, if you would have come 10 years ago, it would be so different to what you're seeing now. And that also was interesting for me to hear, because then I was like, yeah, of course, like this takes time. It's not even just there's part of it in the religion, but in the religion, for example, when you open the Quran, one of the first sentences it says is read. I think the first word of the Quran is read. And that's because they want everybody to have an education and everybody to read. The problem is, and in the Quran, it only says that women should cover their hair. Nothing about that they're not allowed to go to school or their bodies. It's just, the problem is that the Quran has been interpreted in so many different ways that became a thing, but it's more embedded in their culture than their religion. And so I met an anthropologist there, and he would explain to me that actually the Quran doesn't say that women shouldn't go to school or that they shouldn't be allowed to work. It clearly doesn't say that. It says that they should read. And the good thing is that in the cities and in the more in some areas, that a lot of women are working, you know, like the headmistress, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're dentists, and it's great to see. It's just in some areas of Pakistan that they're still working on that. Yeah.
You could probably say the same for Christianity in certain areas of even the USA. I'm sure if you went to some bizarre state, well, you need to be careful, you know, somewhere like Utah, where you have a large Mormon, you know, do you know what I'm saying? It's you know, we need to look to ourselves as well and reflect on ourselves really as well, to say, look, you know, are we holier than thou? Oh, that's lovely. Brilliant.
Thank you. It's
Very
very
good.
kind of you.
Thank you.
So this has actually, amazingly, we've been together now for the last hour and 10 minutes, and it's been quite extraordinary. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything to ask or say, but if they don't, then I'd just like to say I'm delighted that we had the group that have attended this. And it's been, for me, it's, you know, I never realized that it's a bit like what Eddie has used, the word delightful. It's not just being educational. The word delight comes very strongly to mind. There was an impact which really, the whole thing breaks through, I think, the image that I might even have of Pakistan, because I've never been there. So it's been a wonderful event. So thank you very much, Rosie. And it's wonderful. So we're going to make use of this video, or this extraordinary presentation. And I'm even thinking now I will send it to the Pakistan Embassy in Ireland. And many other areas as well. So if nobody else has anything else to say.
Yes, I want to say thank you, Rosie. I was also impressed, and I'm lucky to hear that things are not so. We have learned before what Pakistan is. So I learned another side, and I'm very happy that you took the time for us to speak about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Honestly, I'm just happy that you were here yeah, I'm just happy that some people learned more about Pakistan.
Yes.
So thank you for being here. And yeah, thank you, Eddie, for also putting it on as well. I'm very grateful to Eddie as well.
And just to mention, when Monica spoke there, Monica's German and Rosie's partner is also German.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch.
Ah,
No, I'm very much just on Duolingo.
yes. From where he comes? From where?
From Dortmund, Hagen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so West Germany, just north of Cologne.
Yeah, yeah. I'm from the north, from Hanover.
Ah, beautiful.
Hanover. Mhm.
Ah, okay, yes. No, I've also learned a lot more about Germany because of him.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
No.
So this is great. And I will now say good night to everybody. And I am so happy that this event has not only happened, but it's flowed like pure alcohol and pure water. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a
Rosie.
good day.
You too.
Thank you, Rosie. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.